All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another talk in cybersecurity security seminar. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Sankit, who is the founder and CEO at Palisade, a company that builds modern AI-powered cyber threat intelligence. And whose goal is to defend companies from AI weaponized adversaries. Before Palisade, he was the SVP of engineering for Coupa, where he built the cloud and cybersecurity organization over 12 years from the ground up. And he also held positions, engineering roles at HP and Qualys. Sankit, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Kazim. All right, so welcome everyone. And for me, I'll start with a little bit about me. So for me, it's a huge coming back. I went to Purdue I graduated in 2001, and I attended one of these security seminars about 22 years ago. So feels great to be back, giving back to the students in the community and talking to all of you. I'm based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to Purdue, as I said, in 1990 to 2001, did my master's in computer science. I was very fortunate to have as my advisors Doug Comer and also Mike Artala. We did some pretty interesting projects then. Today, as we are hearing all about AI, I find it pretty interesting. Then when I was at Purdue, I was working on a project for neural networks with the English department. So CERIAS has always held a light for being a multidisciplinary security center. As Kazim mentioned, after Purdue, I went to Qualys as a software engineer. So I was a pretty early engineer building software security products. I helped them build their web server fingerprinting tool, added lots of vulnerability signatures to their product, built some of the early versions of application security and client-side vulnerability checking. Went on to HP, where I broadened from doing cybersecurity software engineering to also managing infrastructure at scale. So we were managing HP.com, also doing security operations for it. And then I went on to Coupa, where I helped build their infrastructure and security from ground up. It was a great learning experience. Being in a financial technology company, going from a 25% startup to becoming a 3,000 plus person public company. After Coupa, I decided that, hey, this is something that I enjoy, and I would like to solve some of the problems that I experienced as a cybersecurity practitioner, and that's what I'm doing right now. So what I wanted to share with everyone today I enjoy working on this intersection of business and technology. As much as cybersecurity is a technology discipline, I think CERIAS had it right many years ago that it's a very multidisciplinary science. And so in order for cybersecurity to be successful, you also need to make sure that you are aligned with the business. And so I'm going to share some best practices that I have learned over my career, being in different roles across different domains. And then the way I want to do this is I'm going to set a scenario. Let's imagine, I want you guys to imagine that you're playing the role of a CISO in an enterprise software company, and I give some setup about how you should think about it. And then we'll go through that role. We'll look at what the objectives we are trying to accomplish, what are the goals, the objectives, what are some of the obstacles we're going to face, what are some of the perils we have to avoid, and then look at some of the challenges that some are resolved, some are open. Okay, so let's paint the picture here. So the setup is that you are working at a company. It's headquartered in Palo Alto in California, as are a lot of enterprise software companies. And the company's 2,000 employees. It has 400 customers. It's as with most enterprise software companies, they start out in North America. So 80% of the customers are American. And then they have branched out into Europe, a little bit into Asia. And so they're gathering revenues from those places. It's a publicly listed company. It's building financial planning software. They have built some organic products, but then they also acquired some smaller companies through mergers and acquisitions, and they have 10 offices across the world. So they have some diversity, complexity, mix of cultures, mix of regulations and stakeholders that they need to deal with. Okay, and then going on to the technology side, let's imagine that this company is building software using modern practices. So that in terms of constraints, we put aside some of the constructs like having data centers or having to deal with legacy programming languages, having to deal with all code written in-house. So something modern that's practically happening right now to make things easier to understand. And then let's imagine you have been brought in as a chief security officer at this company. And so one of the most natural things to do when you're in cybersecurity is to start acting on the highest priority threats, right? I mean, there's been some event that's happened and you have been brought in. And so let's look at the highest priority stuff. There's the common formula that I'm sure some of you have been taught that, hey, risk is threat times impact, and so let's go after the highest priorities. This leads to what I call the carousel of cyber misery. I'm sure there's some other names that we could have for these. I'm actually too happy to take suggestions, but this what rose to my mind first is that there is a security event. You bring in a person to fix that event. And then along come other things that need to respond to. You need to audit vendors, you need to deploy security tools. And this carousel keeps spinning. At some point of time, the person who was hired in, as you can imagine on a carousel that keeps on gaining momentum, is they get dizzy, they want to get off, they want to throw up, or in some cases, the carousel is spinning hard enough and they are not able to hold on to it, and they get thrown off, right? So this is probably not the best to do it, but happens more often than you can imagine. And so the pitfall here is clearly that sometimes having a clear plan of action does not mean having clarity of mission, right? And what I'm going to do is, as I go along the presentation, I'm going to try to make some call outs here. And some of the call outs are more along the lines of giving you things to read. So as cybersecurity students, I can imagine that you don't just believe what I'm saying. And cybersecurity is one of those disciplines that evolves at a very fast pace. Things change very rapidly, so I'm trying to give you some some things to go read and learn more about it. So one of the things to read about would be I would look at 2 incidents. So it's interesting that we are doing this session on Zoom, but if you went and did this Google search, and some of you might remember, some of you might not, this was at the start of the pandemic, and everyone was moving online, and the Zoom was starting to run into issues. There were people who were um, uh, crashing the Zoom meetings. There were people who were changing settings. They had quite a bit of public outcry to the point that I remember having some meetings where people are questioning if those meetings should be had over Zoom, right? And fast forward to 2024. You don't hear much about it. But they went through that phase. And so if you look at that as a case study, you can see the challenges that they had and some of the ways they addressed it. The other one would be Twitter. And this is 2 things. So there was a breach where there was a takeover of a lot of Twitter accounts. Some of them pretty famous people. Their accounts were taken over. A lot of passwords and account credentials were leaked. And that also led to some pretty significant hiring decisions, and they were all if you follow that timeline, there were 2 of them. So there was the initial breach, some decisions outside of that, and then also some follow-on events in 2022. So these would be good ones for you guys to look as case studies. So that, as I mentioned, that's not that while that might be the approach that's taken on the security side, also not a very great long-term strategy. So then you step back and think about it. How does the business think about what are the objectives of the business? Right. Again, coming back to the game paradigm, you're trying to figure out what are the objectives for you to win and succeed. And it's usually no matter where you are. And again, going back to the setup, we're talking about enterprise software for-profit company. So this might not apply to nonprofits. It might not apply to government, which is also debatable, because if you look at some of the news around OpenAI, which is a nonprofit, but you can see a lot of the decisions and strategy are made around profits. So the business objectives usually are clear, right? It's about maximizing shareholder value, making sure that the capital you have gotten from private and public investors is delivering value. The employees who have joined the company are successful, and you can retain them. So then you step back and ask yourself, okay, what would be a good way for me to align with the business? So run with the business. Yes, there's a lot of actions to be taken, work to be done. Yes, I was brought in to accomplish this specific objective. It could be a reaction to a security event, which are some of the examples we have seen. But it could also be that it's not a reaction to a security event. There's a market need. For example, the company wants to expand into healthcare. So they need to do a HIPAA certification. They need to expand into the public sector space. So they need to do a FedRAMP certification. So you're trying to figure out how to align above and beyond the short-term objective. And so one of the paradigms that I've found best in my experience is to start with trust, right? So if you go back to what the business is trying to accomplish, so obviously you're not a salesperson and you can't directly contribute to those. You could be collaborative, but you cannot directly contribute to the sales objectives. But what does the company look for from cybersecurity? And so the primary thing that they're looking for is trust. And so what's the definition of trust? If you look in the dictionary, it's the firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. And this is a great definition because it's not just it's both someone and something, right? So the primary thing that the business has brought you in for, and again, role playing as a CISO, is trust. The management team wants to make sure it's someone that they can trust. The customers will purchase the product, they'll continue using the product as long as they have trust. The partners will keep doing business with your company as long as they have trust. And again, this was a very interesting trend in the mid 2010s. There were companies actually having titles as chief trust officers. Some of them still do, but it didn't really take off. But I also see it coming back with the AI companies because, as you know from the news, there's a lot of questions regarding trust with AI. There are questions regarding safety with AI. And so we're starting to see titles again for chief security officers having titles around safety, having titles around trust. So that's a good starting point. So where do you start? So we start with the management and the internal business matters. So I wanted to lay out an organizational view of typically where a chief security officer reports into. And again, this is for many of you, you might have work experience either through internships or prior jobs, but when you go in, this is something which would be very familiar. There'll be some changes from company to company, but pretty much there will be a management team with executives who have responsibility and accountability for a line of business. And then you have the board and the audit committee and other committees overseeing the business. And so the CISO is typically reporting where the most assets and the information lies, which most companies is the chief information security officer. This varies from company to company. In some cases, they might have some separation where the CISO might report to the general counsel. If it's a very technical requirement, it could be reporting to the CTO. But this is not atypical. And so one of the problems that you see right away is that you need to start interacting with these folks, right? And so you have a lot of people that in order to fulfill cybersecurity, there's a lot of people that you need to interact with, need to win their trust. So you have your management team and your counterparts in IT. You have because you're working with customers, there's a lot of requirements that are coming from customers. And then you have product responsibilities. And as we played it out in the setup, there's multiple products. Some of them might be small, some of them might be large, they might have different requirements. And so one of the interesting things here is that one of the challenges of the role is that you have a large span of responsibilities with a low span of authority and a low span of resources. And it's a position of influence, and that's what makes it a highly challenging role. And so one of the things in order to become successful as you go into this role is to understand what does success mean for all of these folks. And you'll get some very interesting answers, which some you might expect, some you might not. And I also have something here which I deliberately phrased it this way is you want to really ask open-ended questions and understand what does success mean for them, and also over a larger time span. Because if you go back to the original premise, it's possible you were brought in based on a long short-term event to achieve a short-term objective, but you also want to understand what people would like you to do over the long term, and you get some pretty interesting answers. You also get some pretty interesting perspectives because not everyone is familiar with cybersecurity. It's a pretty deep science. You need a lot of experience. You need a lot of the background about a lot of areas, and so get some very interesting perspectives. And those are the perspectives you start with to build trust. The next area is trust with customers and regulators. And one of the ways to build that trust is through certification, right? So this could be something very baseline. So I would recommend looking at NIST. They provide a lot of baseline controls and programs to get started and build them over time. If customers have requirements for, if they're public, they have requirements for Sarbanes-Oxley. They would require something like a SOC 2 report. And then there's industry-specific certifications that you can implement to build trust. Examples of these would be payment card industry, HIPAA if you have healthcare customers and you're a business associate, but then if you are yourself within the healthcare business, then you would need a stronger certification like HITRUST. Other examples of these are FedRAMP if you're working with the public sector. The second part of it, building trust, is making sure that you're doing the audit. So you're doing your internal audits, so you have a good understanding of where things stand. But you're also doing the audits by bringing in third parties, because why would everyone believe you for what you said? You would want to bring in someone who's a neutral third party, who's under some kind of regulation or certification, like the being a CPA, and have them attached to the fact that you're doing what you claim to be doing in your compliance program. And third part is more technical. So you have your product, and make sure you're communicating with your customers about any security bugs that you find, so that they, again, everyone is well aware that software is brittle. They tend to have bugs. And if they don't have a bug that you're aware of right now, you might find it over time. And sharing the fact that you have them helps build trust with customers. If you have security incidents, again, this can be a little bit, you need to be careful with what you share, because it might be repurposed for future attacks. But also sharing in a confidential way with customers the fact that you haven't had incidents, and what is your plan to address them, is a great mechanism to build trust. And people sometimes shy away from it, thinking that they would have get a negative view from that, but it's actually a great mechanism to build trust with sophisticated customers. And the last thing is regulatory filing. So if you are bounded by some regulations, make sure that you are consulting with your general counsel, with your legal team, consulting with the regulations, and doing the filings as you need them. So this, and again, I'll share some case studies of where people might make loose interpretations, but at some point of time, those are not looked upon. They don't help build trust. So again, here are some pointers to case studies to read. There was one which was in the news for quite a while around SolarWinds, where they had a breach. The breach was in their software supply chain. It resulted in the an attack with a malware being introduced into their product. That malware was shipped with their software to thousands of customers, led to loss of data for many government agencies. There was a lot of backlash in the public. And then the SEC has filed a lawsuit. So So there's a lot of learnings around this of how the case was handled and how things could have been done differently. And then this has also led to the SEC passing regulations that public companies should file regulatory filing called a 8K within 48 hours of confirming that they have a breach. And so this has started, and so you'll start seeing some filings. And this is pretty recent. So you'll see this start evolving. But this is also an interesting one to look at to understand what are the learnings from dealing with regulations. The next area is then trust with technology partners. And this is, again, an area that chief security officers or security officers that come from a technology background, they're most drawn to. And if the hiring was done to deal with issues that are coming out of the product, perhaps customers are reporting scanning the product, they're testing the product, they're pen testing, and they're finding issues, and you have a lot of these issues to deal with. And so that could lead to getting someone who would help the company deal with these questions and concerns coming from customers. So this is a very good way. The loop of DevOps is a good way to look at it. And so you start with the biggest area right now is dealing with open source software. So by some studies, 60% of the software that is being developed is based on open source. And the interesting thing with open source is that unlike your commercial vendors, open source software developers, software maintainers, as they're called, are not vendors. A lot of them are writing software either as a hobby or because they're trying to solve a problem. They could not find a commercial piece of software, or a commercial piece of software was too expensive, and so they wrote a piece of software. They're not looking for monetary gain right now, but they might over time. Some of these folks are supported by their employers because the product that they are writing is supporting a product that the company is building. Most of the projects don't have a lot of contributors. And so that's a risk that comes with it. You have fewer people who are contributing to the project. So there's risk that if the project is going to sustain over time, if those contributors either lose interest in it or are compelled to move on to other things. That also leads to questions about quality. It leads to questions about will security issues as they are found be addressed, which sometimes puts the responsibility in the users side to go fix those issues, because the security issues that they find perhaps can be or won't be resolved by the maintainers, either because for lack of resources or bandwidth, or perhaps they also don't philosophically agree with it. The other thing that's starting, a trend that is starting, is that the sophisticated attackers are starting to infiltrate some popular open source projects as contributors. And so over time, they build trust with the project. Maybe they might make some commits that are accepted, and they build trust, they get access, and then at some point of time, they introduce malware, they introduce backdoors, and these start percolating into the products of the companies that are using it. So it's a pretty big area of focus for a lot of organizations. So open source is great. It's democratizes a lot of software. It does bring the code is open, and so anyone can review it. The question that comes up is just because the code is open, does it mean that people are really reviewing it? So going back to to this paradigm, so as Security officer, you're working with development and you're working with operations. Operations in this case is the team that is running the production operation. And so the opportunities you have, so you have a lot of opportunities to introduce security. Ideally, you want to introduce security as early as possible into the cycle. So because the earlier you quash issues, the less likely they're going to make it to production. And so you start with introducing some policies to make sure that this could be how you intake open source software. This could be policies around passwords. It could be policies around making sure that the software uses no passwords are stored in the clear, or it's using secure authentication mechanisms. So you set policies in partnership. So again, the keyword here is partnership. You work with the development team to establish the policies to make sure that code as it's being built out is being built out as securely as possible. Then there's other aspects of application security. You do software component analysis, or SCA, to make sure all components, especially open source, you have a clean SBOM or a software bill of materials, so you know everything that's going into the product. So again, this is something that has been done for many years in critical product areas. So for example, medical devices or automobiles. You'll find that some of the automobiles, for example, the one from the German manufacturers, you'll either get a CD or a piece of a link to where you can find out all the software components that went into the automobile. And so this has been done for many years, especially in areas where the software is going into firmware. But now, because of the large-scale use of open source software, this is something that is being looked at closely to make sure that we are addressing the issues in the software supply chain. Again, going back to the example that we saw previously. Then there's static code analysis, there's code reviews, dynamic code analysis, penetration testing, both internally and making sure that you're using external bug bounty programs. There's also, so you can run, now there are commercial products to run bug bounty programs, what previously used to be only a vulnerability disclosure program. So that's a common way to again work with technology partners and make sure that you're finding issues within the development cycle and addressing them as soon as possible. And then moving into the operation side, you're moving into monitoring the software with a SIEM. You have patches that you need to deploy, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and also configuring the software to make sure that in spite of all your best efforts to have the code secure, the product is not getting compromised by misconfigurations. So again, this is a big area of focus right now where you might be putting a lot of effort into application security. And going back to our premise, we are running this on the cloud. You might have locked everything down, but perhaps you're using some storage online and you left storage permissions were insecure. And as a result of that, you had data loss. That's one example. There's many other examples where you could misconfigure things in production. So having a good program to make sure that you're hardening things in production so that data is not compromised. So this is a lot of stuff. And then as you can imagine, depending on the maturity of the security organization, they can get overwhelmed very easily. I mean, this is a lot of stuff happening just for security. This is on top of the things that the company needs to do to build a product and ship the product and do it in a profitable way. So again, this is the I have personally seen it done well and not done well. So I've seen people who go find a lot of security issues, have a long report, and then send it over to development. And I don't think that would lead to building trust. This might actually lead to having people um, run away or duck when you're at the coffee station. So a better way to do it would be to take it on yourself to make sure that you're prioritizing the security issues, you're contextualizing them. Keep in mind that not all the software engineers are at your level of subject matter expertise in cybersecurity. And so making sure that you're giving them on the context of why the issue is being opened, how it affects things, what the impact is, and a little bit of education goes a long way, because the next time you have to put less effort into educating the developer on why the issue needs to be addressed. So you got your trust with your customers, you got your trust with your regulators, trust with your partners. Now, a little bit about the perils of being a chief security officer. So, as you can, as if you go back to the organization of where the chief security officer, and we talk quite a bit about how it's a lot of responsibility across a lot of organization, and it can be a lot of work to get to reach the objective of achieving trust. So the risks are what we see in the industry is around tenure. So the role, specifically the role, and this doesn't extend to all aspects of cybersecurity roles, but usually at the top, the tenure is typically much shorter in the software industry than it would be for other roles in the software industry and across industry. And there's a lot of contributing factors to this. But this is what the current state is, and it happens for different reasons. And I'm hoping that some of the things that I shared help some people navigate it better. The other problem is authority. So again, it's not someone who directly reports to the CEO, and so as a result of that, you're not in many business decisions that are being taken at executive level. And so while you might have some insights or concerns, these happen in forums which are outside of the executive team. And the third thing is coverage. So the chief security officers are typically, since they are not on the executive team, they're not on the board, and so they are not typically directors of the company. As a result of that, they don't get access to something called DNO insurance, which is directors and officers insurance. And what that does, it indemnifies or gives protection uh, to directors of a company if they make certain decisions on behalf of the company, and those lead to certain problems. And so this is something that is again come under focus, that that at certain companies, chief security officers are asking for this insurance because they're taking on personal liability, which many of them cannot afford to do, both from a financial and career perspective. And so this is one of the areas that we will see more progress on in terms of getting insurance coverage for chief security officers. So a couple of pointers to again learn. Going back to the same example I pointed to before, the SolarWinds breach, and some of the things that came out of it. Another interesting case study to look at is if you look at the Uber case with the FTC. and the things that happened that led to it back in 2017, but then the actions that were taken in 2021. So that's a very interesting case to look at, and in terms of things that might look at on the surface were being handled in an appropriate way, but based on regulation, there are different interpretations, and how the law is taking its course. So one of the so going back to, what are the obstacles that lie between us achieving success? So one of the biggest one is that the frequency, materiality of the attacks and the regulations is just going up. In the 20 years that I have been in the industry, I have not seen I've not seen this phase where you're constantly seeing the more attacks, large scale attacks, and the materiality of the attacks is high. So for example, if you take some of the attacks on Clorox or MGM resorts, the cost of those is in going over $200 million. There are some companies that missed their earnings, or they had to restate their profits, or reforecast their profits, and because of a cybersecurity incident. This is a very rare case of these things happening, and also the frequency of it increasing, or at least in the past. And then we have regulation. I talked a little bit about the 8K regulation. So this is weighing and creating stress on security officers. In addition to that, they're getting a lot of information overload. There's information fatigue. There's news coming in from online journals and articles. There's news alerts that they're subscribed to. I talked about a little bit about news coming from mainstream media. In addition to that, they're part of many cohort groups, and so they're getting these threat information from different channels. And then you also have, again, going back to the org chart, you have your board members who might be sending you information, or you might be reading, getting subscribed to newsletters from analysts where new threats are being brought up. So there's this huge information overload that security officers have to deal with. And the next thing is the shortage of skill. So as much as there's this increase in information and increase in impact, there's a shortage of skills. And that's where we are looking to all of you and more to fulfill the shortage. We need people to take all these threads and make sure that we can stay on top of it. We're not staying behind it. That we can communicate with it, about it, with all of our stakeholders. Remember, that's how we build trust and we retain trust. That's the core objective we are trying to accomplish, and then respond to them, right? So any delays that we have in responding to threat leads to delays in response, which could possibly lead to impact down the line. So it's a virtuous cycle. So again, here's a few pointers to learn about what the cost of a breach could be. The FAIR Institute has been working on this for a few years on trying to calculate risk. They have a website which is tracking the costs of some of the high-profile breaches. So here's a strategy. We talked a little bit about the objective. We talked about the challenge, obstacles, the perils. It's all disheartening, but there is a way to run the security business. Then there's a strategy to do that, and I'm a huge fan of frameworks. Again, as I mentioned, enjoy the intersection between business and technology, and I like taking uh, learnings from different domains and combining together and coming up with a framework. So this is the framework that I have found useful. And again, to manage the business in a way that you win the trust of the company, and you can continue operating the business, not run into the not be on the carousel, and also not be churned. So the first one is around intelligence, right? So make sure that uh, you are on top of the threats that are relevant to your business. So again, there's a lot of information, but you need to figure out a way that you're staying on top of threats. Security is continuously evolving, and so you have to be on top of what are the threats that are relevant to your business. The second thing is assessing where you stand. So you don't know where to go if you don't know where you stand. And so there's a few maturity models I'll reference, but essentially figure out where you stand and create a plan of action. So there's a few ones I'm referencing here. OWASP has a maturity model for application security called OWASP SAM. The Cloud Security Alliance has been doing good work over the years for creating a maturity model for the cloud. I've used this previously, and it gives you a common control framework that you can use across all the certifications that I talked about earlier. And so make sure you have a way that you can measure your business, also stay on top of it in a repeatable way. And the last part is measure, right? Measure what matters. So there's a concept called OKRs, which is objectives, key results, and key results. And so this is what many companies use. It became popular with Google using it. And so this is how some companies pass down objectives laid out at the top level with each business unit. But um, adopt this in the security business, so you are well aware of what are the your key objectives that are aligned with the business, so you know you're again running in the right direction. And find a way to measure things. So this is something I've done. I've had a list of about 20 KPIs that I've used that measure every part of the business. I have a dashboard that measures things across the business. I'm not doing it piecemeal based on what is the short-term objective. I have a dashboard across the whole business. So this is a strategy to make sure that you are managing the business in the same way in your role as we are in this game as a CISO to make sure you're winning the trust and retaining the trust of the business. Now this is a new challenge, and so um, when I first looked at this, I thought I was looking at e-commerce platform when I initially looked at this model recently. But there's something now the attacks have now evolved to a level where ransomware is being offered as a service. Uh, so ransomware has evolved to a point where it's become efficient enough to go after small businesses. So previously, when attackers would go for large amounts of ransom because the risk and the cost did not make sense, uh, they have made it efficient to a point that they can go after a lot more small businesses. There's many businesses who are actively paying ransoms. Very few are publicly reported. As a result of this, there's a business consequence that the cost of cyber insurance is increasing. So this is evolving area. Again, as I mentioned, cybersecurity continues to evolve, sometimes drastically, and this seems to be an area where which is gaining prominence, where smaller businesses sometimes would shrug and say, I don't have a target on my back, I'm too small. But then it's starting to get to a point where ransomware gangs can also go after smaller businesses and collect smaller ransoms, and it's still efficient. So again, the tip for most businesses is do not DIY. Again, as you reach to the case studies, you'll see why, but make sure you know your the agent at your local FBI office. You get help from professionals and law enforcement, and do the right things, and don't stay out of trouble. Then more challenges, right? And so we're talking about challenges. We talked about a framework, but I know I'm talking to a set of bright students. So I want to introduce more challenges that I see are facing the business. Hopefully, some of you can come up with some solutions for these that can be adopted in the industry. So the challenge is keeping up with the increase in materiality impact, right? So so as I mentioned in that DevOps loop, we are finding a lot of vulnerabilities. But the challenge is that there's so many vulnerabilities being found that it's beyond any human to resolve, and that's a big area with that we need to get our heads around. The other thing, we talked about risk, and we talk about the FAIR Institute. And risk scores are great. It helps with actuarial sciences. It helps with cyber insurance. It helps with communicating in terms of dollar amounts with the business. But again, they alone don't result in breaches, and so we need to figure out how to do that association between risks and breaches or preventing them. The third area, of course, top of mind for everyone, is AI. It's early technology. There's lots of challenges. There's challenges with data, with plagiarism, with hallucinations. Again, top of mind as a cybersecurity professional, how do we stay ahead of this? As happened in the past with SaaS or software as a service or with cloud, the business is going to adopt a technology that is going to lead towards their business objective. And so cybersecurity professionals have to stay ahead of the game to make sure that they can help and handle the business to adopt the technology in a secure way. And the last thing is collaboration. So cybersecurity is one of the areas that I found in my various roles in being in business and being in engineering, operations and security. I found that cybersecurity professionals tend to collaborate a lot more. They tend to network, learn from each other. But also what I've seen is that a lot of this collaboration happens over insecure platforms. So the question is, can we improve and accelerate this collaboration so that, the bad guys are working with each other, the good guys should be too. So again, some great resources to learn from. Around AI, you have OWASP doing some great work with the LLM top 10. The CISA working groups and OWASP are both open. You should join them. You should read some of the work. You should participate if you have time. You'll get to work with a lot of great people and learn a lot from it. Around collaboration, CISA has a traffic light protocol. The European Union has products for threat information exchange called MISP and some standards around it. So just finally, again, there's a lot of challenges I have introduced. This is a very interesting area for me. This is something that I enjoy doing, which is helping CISOs to stay ahead of threats and stay in scale, in step with their business, and help match the scale of the business. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll stop now to take questions.
Thank you so much. We have questions in the question and answer section. Can you see them, or do you want
Yeah,
me to?
I can see one.
Yes, there's one.
Okay. So the question, I'll read it out. Do you know of any specific examples where popular FOSS projects were infiltrated by bad actors and used maliciously, excluding other? Yes, there's quite a few. There's actually there's some websites which track the projects being compromised and malware being introduced. So I am happy to send links to people offline. Okay, so the next question is from Chris Malloy. How do you ensure your internal development teams are actually including security controls in their, it says SDM, going to assume SDM means security development lifecycle. Software development. Sorry, I was not aware of that acronym. Okay, so so there's two ways to do it. Actually, there's multiple ways to do it, and the first thing that you start with is make sure that you're aligned with the team. So in most so enterprise software companies, the work that the development team is doing is decided by product management. And so what you want to make sure that the security issues that you're trying to resolve or the security objectives that you meet are aligned with the product management team. And this is in some companies it's called non-functional tasks or non-functional projects. So this includes areas for automation. So if you're doing automation using Terraform, or you're doing some kind of security integrations, say for credential management, or having a password vault. So this would be all non-functional requirements, and you want to make sure that you have allocated cycles in the sprints and the epics and the projects for that work. And that's one problem I typically see, is that the security is coming too late in the cycle. So after the product is developed and it's ready to be shipped, and if you are doing testing and then you are introducing a security requirement, that's too late in the cycle. And so you want to integrate as early as possible, and one of them is to make sure that you are aligned. The other mechanism is through CI/CD. So make sure that your security tools are integrated into the CI cycle, the continuous integration cycle. There's lots of examples of this. There's popular source control projects which will run tests and make sure the code that you're about to commit or post commit, you get a confirmation that the committed code is secure. So I would say two things. One, make sure you get the alignment, and the second, make sure you introduce the tools and do them in a as seamless way as possible, so it's not including a tax or an overhead. No worries.
Thank you. All right. Do we have more questions from audience? All right. Thanks again for the great talk and the Q&A session. I think that concludes this seminar.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kazim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye. You too.